The stars above Cybertron flickered like dying embers, mirroring the fading hope within Optimus Prime's spark. The war had stretched beyond millennia, swallowing galaxies and leaving behind the ashes of what once was. But nothing had prepared him for this. The Titans had returned, not as allies, but as conquerors. Once dormant gods of metal and energy, the Titans had been exiled to the outer edges of the universe after the first great collapse. They were ancient machines built by the Primes themselves, capable of rewriting the physical laws of reality. But betrayal had corrupted them, and now they had risen again, their minds twisted, their power unmeasurable. It began without warning. Space fractured above Iacon as Tarkin the Riftwalker, a titan of enormous size and dimension-warping power, tore through the sky, flanked by others. The ground trembled beneath their descent. Optimus watched from the Citadel of Light as entire Autobot cities were vaporized in seconds. Communications with Earth, Velocitron, and Caminus were lost. The network was silent. The rebellion had begun. Optimus Prime summoned the last remaining High Council. Ultra Magnus, Elita 1, Springer, and a severely damaged Bumblebee stood with him. The hologram table flickered between static and scans of the incoming forces. "These Titans are not here to rule," Prime said gravely, "they're here to erase us." Some argued for evacuation, others for surrender. But Optimus, even under the weight of countless losses, stood resolute. "We face extinction not because we are weak," he said, "but because they fear what we could become. I will not kneel." They activated the Omega Protocol, a last resort plan buried deep within Cybertron's core. The goal: awaken the Prime Core, the living matrix of the planet itself, and harness its power to counter the Titans. But the cost would be high. To tap into the Prime Core was to risk tearing Cybertron apart. As the rebellion spread, cities fell like dominoes. Decepticons who once sought to dominate now begged for sanctuary. Megatron had vanished. Some said the Titans consumed him, others whispered that he had joined them. Only chaos remained. In the deep desert of Polyhex, Prime led an elite squad to retrieve the lost sigil of Vector Prime, one of the few relics capable of shielding minds from Titan influence. Ambushed by corrupted Seekers and one of the Titans, Gravemind, the team suffered heavy losses. Bumblebee was torn apart, saving Optimus, who barely escaped with the relic and a deep wound in his spark chamber. As he stood over Bumblebee's silent frame aboard the Ark, Optimus felt a sorrow deeper than code could measure. "I failed them all," he whispered. But even in that moment of despair, the matrix of leadership pulsed within him. A faint glow. A whisper of hope. At the edge of the known galaxy, in the ruins of Primordia, the final resistance gathered. Autobots, neutral bots, even a few defected Decepticons, they all looked to Optimus now. He no longer saw himself as a leader. He was a survivor of a dead era. But he knew what had to be done. "The Titans were forged by us," he told them. "And now, it will be by our hands that they fall." He raised the sigil high. The stars answered. The surface of Cybertron was barely recognizable. Once gleaming with life and machinery, the planet had become a graveyard of twisted metal and burning skies. Entire regions floated in pieces, suspended by the gravitational anomalies caused by the Titans' presence. The rebellion had grown beyond war. It had become a cleansing. The Titans sought not just dominion, but purification of all that deviated from their vision of order. The Autobot way, with its emotions, its choices, its hope, was their greatest threat. Optimus Prime stood at the helm of the last Ark, now retrofitted into a warship. Around him, survivors prepared for what could only be described as a suicide mission. Cybertron's core had been breached. The Prime Core, the beating heart of the planet, was awakening its pulse, throwing magnetic storms across the surface, destabilizing the atmosphere. And within its hollow chamber waited their Axis, the first Titan and their leader, a being of incomprehensible power forged before even the Primes. They had no choice. The Omega Protocol had unlocked the coordinates of the Well of Sparks, where the ancient Titans first emerged. Prime's goal was not only to face their Axis, but to reconnect with the Sparkstream itself, what remained of Primus, the creator, and use its force to ignite the Force Prime, a mythic convergence of the original Matrix with the Prime Core. With Elita 1 at his side, and the remaining resistance forces covering their descent, Optimus led a strike force into the catacombs beneath Iacon. Along the way, they faced Titan Sentinels, massive biomechanical guardians created to defend the inner sanctum. Entire squads were lost as the Sentinels tore through them, their armor impervious to normal weaponry. But Optimus had something else, the Sigil of Vector Prime. When activated, the sigil distorted time itself for brief moments. Prime used it to slip between seconds, striking at weak points and guiding his forces through the chaos. The deeper they traveled, the more unstable reality became. Time loops, hallucinations. Whispers from dead Autobots filled the tunnels. The influence of the Titans was not only physical, it was existential. In the final chamber, they reached the Well of Sparks, a vast glowing vortex of light and energy, suspended between reality and the spiritual plane. Floating above it stood Thraxus colossal, almost celestial. His voice was a vibration that shattered steel. "You are not leaders," he said to Prime. "You are the disease of choice. We are the cure." Optimus stepped forward, raising the matrix of leadership in defiance. "Then let this be the day the disease fights back." The battle that followed was unlike any Cybertron had ever known. Energy storms erupted as Thraxus summoned ancient powers, bending gravity and time. Elita 1 and the others were thrown back, barely holding their own against the other Titans that arrived. Prime faced Thraxus alone, blade ignited, voice steady. He was no longer fighting just for victory, he was fighting for the right of free will, the soul of Cybertron. Their blows sent shockwaves across the planet. As Thraxus unleashed a beam that could tear moons apart, Prime used the Matrix to channel the force of 1,000 sparks. The Matrix exploded with light, and for the first time, Thraxus staggered. But it wasn't enough. The Titan impaled Optimus through the chest with a spear of dark energy. The arc scanners showed his spark fading. Elita screamed. The resistance forces began to break. The Titans surged forward. But then something changed. Optimus, his spark still flickering, reached out to the well. His hand touched the stream. And it answered. A blinding light erupted from the chasm. The well itself surged into him, merging the Prime core with his matrix. The ground split. The sky ignited. The Titans froze. Prime rose from the edge of death, armor transformed, energy flowing like rivers through his limbs. He had become more than a leader. He had become a conduit of Primus. "Your time has ended," he said. His voice echoed through every spark still alive. And with a roar that shook the stars, Optimus launched himself back into the sky to face the Titans one last time. The moment Optimus Prime merged with the Prime core, the very fabric of Cybertron shifted. Energy surged through the veins of the planet. Mountains lifted. Skies cracked. And the Titans, those ancient, invincible machines, hesitated. They recognized the force now radiating from Prime not as a weapon, but as judgment. Optimus hovered in midair, no longer bound by the constraints of circuitry or gravity. His body had become a glowing fusion of steel and cosmic fire. The Force Prime was alive within him, a convergence of every Autobot spark, the Matrix, and the consciousness of Primus itself. His optics no longer glowed blue, they shone like starlight. Thraxus, the ancient Titan warlord, lunged forward once more, his colossal arms tearing through the burning winds. "You are not a Prime," he roared. "You are an anomaly." Optimus answered only with motion. In an instant, he crossed the battlefield and drove a blade of pure energy into the chest of the Titan. The impact created a thunderclap that leveled entire mountain ranges. The other Titans tried to retaliate, but they were no longer fighting a machine. They were facing the will of Cybertron incarnate. One by one, the corrupted Titans fell. Tarkin was ripped apart by a pulse of gravitational force. Gravemind was consumed by his own shadows when Optimus reversed the flow of dark energy. Even the skybound Titan, Etherian, was struck down mid-flight as Prime soared upward, disintegrating his form with a single burst of radiant power. Elita 1 and the remaining resistance forces watched from the ruined surface below, barely able to comprehend what they were witnessing. Optimus Prime, who had once stood among them as a soldier, had now become a legend in motion, a force no longer constrained by war or suffering, but forged by it. But victory would not come without cost. As the last Titan collapsed, its spark rupturing in a deafening explosion, the well of sparks began to destabilize. The energy Optimus had drawn was never meant to be wielded indefinitely. The core of Cybertron, now fractured from battle, began to collapse inward, drawing in the last remnants of the ancient Titan's power. The planet groaned, cried out. Prime turned to Elita 1 through a fading comlink. Cybertron cannot survive this power. I must go with it. No, she shouted, racing toward the well even as the ground crumbled beneath her feet. We can stabilize it together. Optimus smiled gently, his voice distant, already beginning to echo across dimensions. The Autobots will live. You will lead them. This was always my burden. As the light from the well grew unbearable, Optimus rose above it, arms outstretched, absorbing every last pulse of uncontrolled energy. His form began to break apart into stardust and fragments of memory. His voice spoke not just through comms, but through the Matrix itself, into the minds of every living Autobot across the universe. Do not mourn me. I am with you, every spark, every gear, every step forward. As long as one of you stands, I will never fall. And then, with a final blinding flash, Cybertron's core collapsed, folding in upon itself and sealing the well of sparks within an endless sleep. Silence followed. The surviving Autobots drifted in orbit, aboard the last remaining ships, watching their home fade into a scar of light. The Titans were no more. The war had ended not with conquest, but with sacrifice. Weeks passed. The galaxy stirred again. Refugees from lost worlds gathered. A new Cybertron would not be built from metal and control, but from remembrance and choice. Elita 1 stood before the new Autobot Council, holding the Matrix that had survived Prime's ascension, dim now, but warm. He didn't die, she told them. He became something greater. He became the promise we must now keep. And somewhere, in the vast currents of the spark stream, beyond the edge of stars and silence, a presence watched. Not as a leader. Not as a warrior. But as a guardian. Optimus Prime had not vanished. He had become eternal.